minutes.
Yeah, no worries. Can you see the slides?
Perfect.
Can you see the slides or the notes page?
Just the slides.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you so much, Cam, for inviting me to come and speak to you today. So my name is Marnie Shaw. I'm from the Australian National University in Canberra, and I work in the Battery Storage and Grid Integration Program. And when Cam asked me to give you guys a talk, I was very happy to do so and said yes straight away, because there's a lot happening in community battery space. And I'm very excited and happy to be able to give you an update of the projects that are actually looking like rolling out some community batteries on the NEM most likely this year. So that's the title is Where Are We At with Community Batteries? So what I'm going to do with this talk, if you will indulge me, I would like to give you a summary of the work that we've been doing in the last 2 years. We had an ARENA funded project looking at community batteries, and we just finished that at the end of last year. So I'd like to give you a kind of overview of all of our findings and insights from that project. And then after that, I will give you a bit of a view of what's happening in this space, the projects that have already rolled out and the projects that are in planning. And I thought you would be most interested to hear what are the kind of key challenges that those projects are facing at the moment. And because I imagine you're all thinking, you know, should we look into getting community batteries? What are the key things that you need to think about when you're thinking about planning to have a community battery in your area? So our sort of overall finding from our project was that we found that the novel location and sizing of community batteries looks like they offer benefits over household and grid scale storage. So obviously we know moving forward with energy transition, we need a fair bit of energy storage. And the big question is, what is the most useful scale moving forward? And we have identified some specific benefits with this scale of storage. So when we say this scale, we're looking at sort of 0.5 megawatt to a few megawatt hours size. And we're usually talking about batteries that are sitting in the distribution part of the network. So it's the part where the houses are, the low voltage part of the network. Just before I go on, I just wanted to clarify one thing, that in this space there's a lot of different terms used: community battery, community scale storage, neighbourhood storage, and it can be quite confusing. For us, we have reserved the term community battery for the specific scenario where the battery is either owned by the community, operated for the community, or operated to benefit the community indirectly. So we'll see examples where that's not always the case, or it's not exactly black and white. So here, this, as I said, the project we've been working on was funded by ARENA, and all of the outputs from that project are published on the ARENA website. So if you want to go and have a bit more of a read about the work that we did, I've got the link here that gives the reports. So the way we approached this study, I think, was quite a unique approach, in that we wanted to look at both the technical and economic aspects of community batteries, as well as the social side, which we see as really crucial to making, you know, any technology working. You have to understand what it is that people actually want, and nobody would understand that better than you all on this call. So I'm sure you appreciate that. So we worked together. We had a social researcher working on this project, Hedda Ransom Cooper, and she designed this really pretty huge social research component where she went out and interviewed not just industry stakeholders, so networks, retailers, regulatory bodies, some community energy advocates, She also interviewed a bunch of householders, so did these focus groups all around Australia, talking to householders about what it is that they want in energy storage and how they could see or couldn't see that community batteries might work as a solution. So one of these reports is from her. I don't know if you can see the pointer, the stakeholder views of the role of this type of storage. So let me just give you, this is kind of the link to the reports, but I'll just give you a little overview of what we found over the whole project. So this is from Hedda's work with the stakeholder reports. So she's divided up into the opinions or the views of energy professionals and citizens, and divided it into benefits and risks. So you can see, all the ones that you would expect. For instance, energy storage supporting renewables and decarbonisation, the role of batteries at specifically this scale in voltage and frequency management on the grid, potentially more reliable control than residential batteries. I won't go through all of these. You can come back and have a look at the list, but it's really very extensive sort of list of benefits and risks from these two groups. I just want to point out the interesting thing that their citizens identified some benefits that were not identified by the energy sector professionals, like the ability to increase local energy self-sufficiency, also things like increasing transparency in the energy system, but also some risks that I think need to be kept in front of mind when you're thinking about planning this type of project. The risk of people, the things that people are concerned about in terms of environmental impacts, the potential of operators coming in and extracting profits from the community. So these are just things to be mindful of, and I think it just gives a nice overview of the benefits and potential disadvantages. So one of the things that we realised early on, and this is what industry stakeholders told us as well, is it's clearly going to be challenging on the East Coast anyway, to manage the dynamics between different actors. This sounds confusing, but actors in disaggregated markets. So what we're really talking about is on the NEM, the National Electricity Market on the East Coast, we have the networks is a regulated asset, and we have the retailers, which are non-regulated. And having a battery is complicated because you need to have these different parties who are working together to set up and operate the system. This is not an issue in Western Australia, where the network and the retailers are state-owned and they're essentially the same entity. So that makes it a lot easier to implement batteries, community batteries over there in Western Australia, and that's why they've gone ahead, and by now they have something like 15 community batteries already installed in Western Australia. Here's another key takeaway from the social research, which was really a big surprise to me, coming from more of a physics engineering background, and but wasn't at all a surprise for Hedda, was that householders care about much more than affordability when it comes to energy storage. So there's concern about battery life cycle, the fairness of how the battery is used, and how the technology fits into the broader transition to renewables. So I expect that wouldn't surprise you all on this call either. But I guess coming from more of an engineering way of thinking about things, you think cheapest is best, and if it's cheap, then everyone will want it. But it's more complicated when it comes to looking at what people actually want from renewable technology. So now, in terms of the technical benefits of this type of storage, we're really interested in whether this energy storage will enable a higher, larger amount of renewable technology to be integrated into the grid. So we're talking about solar panels on roofs, we're talking about electric vehicles and so on. That's the reason why we need energy storage, is to allow us to have a higher penetration of energy generation and increasingly electrified loads. So we're interested to test whether community scale storage, a larger battery, does a better job of supporting the integration of those renewables compared to having individual household batteries. So when we have done simulations, and these are results of some of our simulations, and I just really wanted to include at least one graph in this talk. So this is a simulation of if you had a suburb of 200 houses and you looked at the total energy going into that suburb and the total energy coming out. So the orange is the imports, the yellow is the exports. And what we want is that the imports are decreased. So we have reduced load because it's going to be hard to meet the load when we have electric vehicles, for instance. And we also want reduced exports. And that's because as we have more and more solar generation on our rooftops, our power exports back up to the grid are increasing. And that's going to be a problem unless we have energy storage. So we want both of those measures to come down. And in our simulations, we showed that household batteries do a pretty good job of reducing both. And when we had a community battery of equivalent capacity, it did an even better job of reducing the imports and exports. So just quickly, because I think it's actually pretty clear that there are economic benefits potentially of this type of storage, because overall you need less battery per house. So it's both cheaper and also we're concerned to be using fewer battery resources. So you need overall less per house. There's a lot of interest in how do you value stack for this type of storage to increase the economic feasibility. So you're trying to make the most money you can out of markets, out of frequency support and so on. So that's what we mean by value stacking. And then, in terms of regional areas, this is ideas that are really extremely well presented in Helen Haynes' local power plan, the benefits that flow through to the local community in terms of local jobs and training and keeping money within the community. So this is related to the technical work, so it's sort of slightly out of place, but one of the key takeaways when we've done our simulation and modeling of community batteries is that we realized that it's necessary. You have to have a reduced local network tariff to get the battery to operate in the way we want it to operate, which means charging from locally generated solar and discharging to meet the loads of local houses. So I'm not sure if everybody on the call already knows that the way we pay for energy, we pay for the energy and we pay for the transport of energy. And here we're talking about that transport of energy. And there's a lot of talk at the moment reducing that energy transport price for local transport costs. So, we're not paying the same amount to transport an electron from Queensland to Canberra as we are, from my neighbour to my house. Okay, so that is all I'll say about our results so far. And now I'll talk about the battery projects that have already been rolled out. I mentioned that there have been projects already rolled out in Western Australia where it's kind of a lot more straightforward to do it. There's one in Victoria from United Energy, these pole-mounted batteries, which is such a cool idea to have it up on a pole where you probably wouldn't even notice that it's there. This sort of falls into the category where it's potentially not quite a community battery because it's owned by the network and it's being used for network services. So as far as the households are concerned, they wouldn't even know that it's there, but it's doing the job of soaking up that extra solar PV during the day. So that's rolled out. It's also potentially a quite expensive solution to have these smaller batteries mounted up on a pole. Okay, so these are the really exciting projects that are in planning on the East Coast. So one is from Ausgrid, which is the network operator in Sydney. So this battery would be network owned. It will actually be a few batteries that are networked together. So it's network owned and it's for customers with solar who sign up for this specific community battery scheme. Another one is from the community retailer Enova in New South Wales. And this battery would be owned by Enova, which is a non-profit community group. and it would operate using a peer-to-peer scheme. Then the third one is a battery. It was just announced not last week, the week before, from Yarra Energy Foundation in Melbourne. And the really unique thing about this battery idea is that it is planning to use a community co-investment model. So the proponent of that project, who's Chris Wallen, is claiming this is the world first idea to have community co-investment with private investment that will have joint ownership of the community battery. And they have a strong partnership in place with the local network operator, who is CitiPower. And the last one I'll mention, which is just really an idea at this stage, it's not in planning yet, which is a battery in one of the suburbs here in Canberra, in Jacker. And that would be owned by a third party. And I guess the really interesting thing about that battery is that that would be an all-electric suburb. It's a greenfield suburb. So it would be a good way to trial out how the battery provides support of this all-electric when we get rid of gas and we have these really large, unpredictable electricity loads, how the battery can support that. So I think what's really exciting, apart from the fact that it's actually happening, community batteries, is that they are all four really quite different models of how you would design and implement a community battery. So it provides really the perfect way for us to see what works well, what doesn't work well. And this is obviously what we need moving into the future, a bunch of these trials, and hopefully, you know, really trying different models of ownership and operation so we can see what works best. So I just thought I would mention now the challenges that are facing these community battery projects. So it sort of falls into two categories. If the battery is owned by the network, they face a pretty big regulatory challenge in that networks are not allowed to own assets that are used for buying and selling energy on the NEM. So this comes under the ring fencing rules that were put in place to make sure that there's separation between the assets that are regulated and the assets that are non-regulated that a network is involved in. And I'll mention something further about all of these points in a minute. If the battery is not owned by the network, then you don't face really any major regulatory challenge. But there are a number of kind of logistical challenges that you face, and they're particularly difficult because it hasn't really been done before. So you can't look at, oh, this is how they did it, so this is how we'll do it. So I'll just go through each of these in more detail. So the regulatory challenge for the networks is being looked at by the energy regulator, the AER, and they put out a paper last year which proposes to change the rules for the ring fencing guidelines for energy storage devices that will make it easier for networks to own community batteries. In our work, we are recommending that caution be taken when it comes to allowing to own batteries and to use them in a way that, say, one of your community energy groups might do it. It's because they have a market advantage if they are owning and operating batteries. And that's the reason why those ring fencing laws were put in place in the first place. So I think, you know, we haven't said whether or not we think it should be allowed, but we have certainly put in a submission to this issues paper saying that caution needs to be taken in allowing the networks to own these assets. Okay, so in terms of if the battery is being owned by a third party who's not the network, then there are some specific logistical decision making that needs to be done. And this is what all of those other battery projects are going through at the moment. And the way these decisions are made is either encoded directly into the hardware of the battery, how it's set up, or into the software, which does the decision making of how the battery operates. And really the decisions are around the fact that the battery offers value to different parties. So offers network support, offers the opportunity to make money from markets, offers the opportunity to have virtual storage for customers, as well as environmental services. So how do you balance those different sources of value for the different parties who can benefit from them? So it sounds kind of theoretical, but it's not. It's actually something that needs to be decided on in the project, and because it will impact the way the battery actually functions. So for instance, you have to work out who, with the local network provider, what services the battery is going to provide for the network, and set up a bilateral agreement for that, and work out how the network is going to pay for those network services. You also have to think about how the battery is going to buy and sell energy on the markets. So whether you're going to outsource the frequency control service, which is the most lucrative way for the battery to make money, by the way, energy arbitrage, if it's going to be part of a virtual power plant, and whether you're going to do that through retailers, licensed market participants, or through power purchase agreements, PPAs, or maybe it will be some combination of those. The third kind of logistical decision making that needs to be looked at is how the customer participation. So how will customers participate with this type of battery? Will it be through a subscription model, which is what the Ausgrid battery is looking at? Will it be through peer-to-peer trading, which is what Enova is looking at? Through co-investment, which is what the Yarra Energy Foundation battery is looking at? Or would the customer have no participation in the battery, just sits there and does a great job, but you don't have to worry about any of it? So that needs to be worked out. And then the environmental services, minimising carbon emissions. So the other challenges that are one would face when looking at this type of project is forecasting profit, and this has implications for securing finance for a project. And it's really particularly difficult because of all the changes that are taking place in the market at the moment. The switch to 5-minute market settlement, which will probably benefit the batteries of feasibility, but we don't know that it will, and we don't know how it will. So that's a challenge. The social license to operate a battery like this in your region, battery whole of life management, safety. And then this is kind of a biggie that doesn't belong in a small list, but it's a big picture thing, is that a challenge that faces all of us, the whole industry, is the market mechanisms to reward the non-energy services that can be provided by the battery. For instance, increasing hosting capacity for solar, for electric vehicles, frequency inertia services, emissions reduction and resilience. These are things that don't have dollar values attached to them that the battery can provide. So obviously moving forward, we need to think about how to financially motivate these services from energy storage in general, not just for community batteries. So this is my last slide. From our work and the work of many people, it's clear that community batteries can be a way that we can increase the capacity for us to connect renewables onto our networks. So the amount of solar generation, the electric vehicles, there are big benefits in boosting local resilience. So this is specific to regional communities, socially, economically and electrically. It's important for us to make the most of this opportunity to be cost effective, like to do value stacking of this type of storage to make it economically feasible, as well as providing these important services to as many different parties as we can. And I think it's just a super exciting time in this space because these different models are being trialed, and it will be important now over the next few years to make sure we assess the projects and the way they're operating in terms of not just economically and not just technically, but also socially. So we need to look at it, at how these projects actually roll out in practice. So that's it from me, and please feel free to contact me. I've got my email address here if you have any questions or suggestions for us. And yeah, that's it.
Fantastic, Mani. Do we have time maybe just for 2 or 3 questions?
Yeah, sure, of course.
We can keep them quite brief. I just saw Sue Gold asked in the chat, is there any part of this research that explores the value of integrating community battery and residential scale batteries for local benefit?
So for modelling together community battery and household batteries?
So are you able to clarify that one?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, so what I'm wondering is around, a lot of us are doing a lot of projects and getting a lot of funding to install residential, privately owned scale batteries and batteries into businesses and onto community buildings. And we're quite interested in sort of Beechworth looking at community scale battery where we can integrate community scale plus residential behind the meter or in front of the meter battery installations into a larger scale virtual grid through a retailer where we can generate, store and then distribute energy locally. And a lot of the research we're finding talks about the benefit of residential or business scale battery, or talks about community scale battery, but not how you can actually use all of those facilities together with some sort of agreement in place to do so.
Yeah, that's a very insightful question, Sue. And it's not modelling that we have done. In fact, I don't think anybody has done sort of modelling of that kind, and it would be great to do it, and also to do it in like a virtual power plant style model where we can actually look at the energy sharing between the different types of storage. So it's a really good idea, and yeah, we should do it.
We'd love to, Marnie. So if you can help us get that project off the ground, we'd love it.
Yeah. Well, we were already planning to do like a virtual power plant modelling and of the community battery, and that would also involve household batteries. So on the modelling side, that's what we will be doing. In terms of actually practically getting it up, we can share our results with you to show the benefits of it. I think that's the most helpful we can be for you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
We've probably got time for one more question. Anyone else got a question for Mani before she has to head off?
Yeah, it's Fiona Roberts from DALP.
Yes, Fiona, talk to us.
Yeah, what I'd like to say is that in our budget in November, there was an announcement that there's $11 million for a neighbourhood scale battery initiative. They're hoping to fund 10 different projects across the region, across the state. And they're looking to fund a whole lot of different models of community neighbourhood scale batteries. And last week, it was in the Minister's office. We haven't, and it's come out of the Minister's office, but I don't have any other details yet, but I'll certainly forward that on to Neeson as soon as we hear.
That's exciting.
And working actively with that department, Fiona, so it's been really exciting to hear that they've got funding to put towards the projects.
Fantastic. And Andy Webb, did I hear you before as well?
Yeah, please. Just a sort of quick one to Marnie, just regarding the hi Marnie, just the local network tariffs. I'm just wondering if there's sort of any what your feeling is or feedback is from sort of the regulatory agencies about where that might land, if there's any sort of feeling on where it's going at the moment, because I know it's all a bit up in the air, but that is one of the big issues with community batteries, as you highlighted. So I'm really keen to know if there's any possible progress.
Yeah, I didn't have an update, Andrew. So it was flagged in a submission to the regulator that Mark Byrne put in last year. but it wasn't specifically put in as a rule request. It was just included as, you know, heads up, this is something that's happening. So I don't know, I need to check in with AER if anything else has happened so far. As far as I kind of am aware, we have to demonstrate what are the implications of changing that tariff. Like, it's quite a big thing to change a tariff. You have to show that it doesn't disadvantage any group, you know, unfairly. So there is kind of a package of work that needs to be done before it actually gets implemented. But I will say that at the moment, the networks are often being pretty flexible about offering a lower tariff for these trial projects. So, and they're actually allowed to do that. They can have a different tariff for some percentage of their customers, I think 5% or something, without any rule change. That's allowed already. So for the trial projects, it's not a deal breaker, but rolling them out large scale, it will need to be changed.
Fantastic, thanks, Marnie. And I see Rob Caroline actually has just put in a question in chat, which seems almost philosophical in the way it's phrased and the question itself. So the complexity of this is really interesting as it challenges our economic model, which currently is pretty simple. I do something you want, you pay for it. Do we need a different governance of decision-making to build trust? Are you equipped to answer that one, or should we take that as what are you thinking, Marnie?
I mean, yeah, okay, I can't answer that question, but it's clearly that we need to move beyond this energy only market. Do we have built-in, how we build that, I'm not sure. It's a quite complex question.
Fantastic. I quite enjoyed the question. Maybe we can all mull that one over. Marnie, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you've inspired some of the groups, and I reckon you're probably going to get quite a few emails over the next week or two.
I look forward to that. And I just want to say that I have so much respect for community groups like all of yours. I know you all work really hard on these projects, and I think because of the work you do, it results in projects like this. So thank you very much for all your hard work in the community energy space.
Fantastic, thank you.